Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 78. I'm recording it on Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And I just attended an excellent class on Torah, on a chapter in Exodus. And it got me thinking about, not just kind of like the understanding that that we have of God, that comes from reason. God is the creator, hence God must be the governor, the controller, and God must be everything. To this idea that that's helpful. That kind of understanding is helpful, but also what I guess the essence of understanding God is about is feeling God's presence. And I think maybe I literally mean feeling, because like the reason I say that is like we have minds and we strive to be logical, to make sense and all, but these thoughts that we have are really tools. They're tools to help us essentially, seek and obtain more pleasure and happiness and avoid pain and suffering. Because our fundamental experience as human beings really isn't so much cognitive or thought oriented. What really matters to us most is feeling. And so I'm thinking now that, like, to be able to cultivate that feeling is, I believe, important work. So now I'm thinking, like, all right, so how does one cultivate, a stronger feeling of God? And I guess I go to, like, when I've worked on happiness for a couple of decades, learning about it, practicing it, teaching it. And one thing I learned was that, and I've also meditated for almost 45 years, about 45 years. And so, like, what I've discovered is that and this is, like, they have traditions in Buddhism about this. When you meditate, for example, on loving kindness, in Buddhism it's called metta, then that can fill you with the emotion of loving kindness, and so, like, I would meditate on the feeling of happiness, of joy, and I very pleasantly discovered that, yes, the more I meditated on happiness, the easier it became to summon up the feeling pretty much at will, which is interesting because, like, I really have developed that ability to a certain extent. And what's curious is I don't use it probably nearly as much as I could, given, again, that my, our fundamental motivation or purpose is to be as happy as possible, as virtuous as possible also. So now tying that with this kind of, like, idea of feeling closer to God, I'm thinking now, how does that play out in meditation? Because I believe that meditation is the right practice. Well, I don't know, because some people, for example, who play an instrument might feel God through that, or who dance, whatever. So I guess there's different ways, but just the idea of meditation is, like, everything stops and you focus on whatever you're focusing on, whether it's your breath or a mantra, whatever. It's just concentrated focus. And so the question becomes, all right, to feel, excuse me, hold on. To feel closer to God, what would that meditation look like? I mean, like, because one can meditate on, I guess, the conception of God. And that's kind of like an intellectual meditation, really. Because, like, if you're meditating on who God is, well, you might start out, well, God is the universe. God is everything. God is every universe that has ever been created, that God has ever created. God is just everything, okay? This is God's gig. This is God's reality. We're manifesting and experiencing God's presence, God's will and all. So I guess that's part of it. Yes, I guess to have a kind of like an open-ended kind of meditation, because meditation can take different forms. There's one kind of meditation is about focus. Most meditations are about focus, but one meditation, mindfulness meditation, open-minded mindfulness meditation, is really about just, sitting and experiencing whatever thoughts and feelings come, without any kind of direction at all, just observing. So that seems to be a good strategy for getting closer to God through meditation. And again, just like, in my experience, I cultivated the ability to summon up happiness at will much more easily. That the same would have to hold true, I would imagine, with cultivating the ability to summon up this presence, this sensory, emotional connection with God at will. And so, I mean, I meditate every day, several hours generally. And so hopefully later I will meditate, and I'm gonna, so what I'm gonna do, because we've just begun to talk about this, and what I'm going to do is practice. And I have done this before, actually. Like, for example, I have meditated where I silently repeat to myself the word God. And that, yes, I mean, if you're silently repeating the word God, then your mind, your thoughts are going to be about God more so than other aspects of reality. Now, like, as with anything, so you're saying God to yourself over and over, and you're thinking God, but other thoughts are gonna, that's what happens in meditation. You're meditating, and then you get distracted from the train of thought, and then you realize you're distracted, and you pull back to the focus. So, but yeah, now I'm thinking of how, because again, based on this series, I think my understanding and connection with God, to God, has grown. And so maybe it'd be interesting to see if that would be reflected in the meditation and the effects of the meditation. So, all right, so but I just want to brainstorm this idea of like feeling closer to God. What does that mean? Again, not in a conceptual way so much, but as in an emotional way. And you have to think that like feeling close to God has to feel like feeling really loved. And actually, yes, I should probably, try to come up with these questions of what it feels like in order to know what to focus on more clearly in the meditation. So yes, this idea that like, we feel God's presence, and we're feeling like this sovereign of the universe, this creator of the universe, greater than anything else we can imagine, loves us profoundly, loves us completely. And that's got to generate great, strong feelings of comfort, of peace, which and it reduces anxiety. It just like, and so like, what else? God not only loves us, God, I believe, created this world, created us. I mean, our purpose, God is most pleased with us, I believe, when we're naturally virtuous, but it's not enough just to be virtuous. In other words, like we could be, virtuous martyrs. I don't think God would be pleased with that. So I think, we are, I think, mostly called upon to feel happy, to feel joy. And I think that's what pleases God the most. And I think that's perhaps how we can feel the closest to God. And actually, could like, you can be happy in different ways. So kind of like in, experiencing your happiness through the connection with God that causes you in a way that causes one to both love God and love oneself and other people more, is probably the goal of that kind of connection, you know. So so yes, so yeah, because and the hope would be that as we summon up this this feeling of closeness to God, this feeling of connection and loving God and being loved by God. You know, I think it does. I think it would just generate many more of these feelings that we then direct to ourselves and each other. Because, like, you know, in a certain sense, I'm not sure God really needs us to love her. I don't think she, I don't think she really needs to love us, I suppose. You know, but we need to love ourselves and each other, you know, because again, like, you know, we, you know, I would hope, you know, I would hope that God, being all powerful, you know, lives in a realm, exists in a realm where she's like completely blissful 24/7, you know, just like, you know, and yeah, I guess God may empathize with our pain, but I'm hoping for God's sake, of course, that it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, let's say you're a parent and you have to like chastise a toddler and you pretend to be angry, you know, so like, so the toddler senses the significance of what you're trying to say or the import, whereas you're kind of like, you're not really feeling that anger, but the child, you know, understands, you know, the communication. So I hope that's what, you know, really God experiences herself, you know, as just like completely joyful, but just like, you know, pretends pretends to like, you know, empathize with us or whatever. Just like, I mean, you know, it's not pretense, of course, but, you know, it comes from love. But all right. So what else? So all right. So um, I want to continue. So like, so let's say you know, we, you know, because hopefully you'll try this at home. You know, usually there's a lot of things, don't try this at home. Yes, try this at home. Try this, do this as much as you can. And meditation, it doesn't have to be for hours, it doesn't have to be for 20 minutes. You can sit for like 2 minutes, close your eyes and just focus on God. Focus on what God means to you. Focus on how you understand God. You can even, you know, God, one thing like growing up, I kind of like somehow got the idea, and I don't know how I got this, but it was this idea that like, well, you really shouldn't bother God too much, you know, that, you know, ask God for important things, but don't be asking God about every little thing, every other moment. And then, you know, then from studying Judaism, I learned that no, you know, God, the more you ask God stuff, the more God is pleased, you know, and naturally, you know, when you ask God things and you don't receive them or immediately, whatever, and then you're not supposed to like become upset with God or become frustrated because that wouldn't make sense. Um, and um, and you don't want to be in a kind of like a state of perpetual need where you're asking and asking and asking, you know, having this sense of, well, I don't have enough, so I need to ask. No, just asking is kind of like, you know, anytime, like, you know, you're feeling a little chilly, you know, hey God, you know, like make me warmer. So like so yeah, so that's you want to yeah, asking God for whatever, you know, I think is a good meditation. Because, you know, I have to understand with meditation a lot of times, for example, there's some meditations called koans, and these are questions that a person repeats to themselves over and over that are illogical. Like, you know, one famous koan is like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And you're thinking, huh? So like, but anyway, so like there is a tradition of asking questions in meditation, maybe not so much about of asking many different questions, but I think this, you know, to meditate on your understanding of God uh, would would I think be good in that way. Now I just noticed that I'm kind of like because like my default mode isn't so much feeling per se, it's kind of like thinking and trying to figure things out. So, like that kind of meditation seems a bit too cognitive, if we want to cultivate a stronger feeling, of connection to God. So, all right, here's something else. All right. And this is powerful. I started doing this several years ago, and it's really my default meditation now, the meditation I generally do. Um, and it's a form of mindfulness meditation. There are four general forms of mindfulness: mindfulness of thoughts, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of body sensations, and mindfulness of some other abstract thing. I never could understand that. So anyway, so when I meditate, I focus on my body sensations. Like there's tension we hold in different parts of our body. I kind of like, the way they teach this meditation in Buddhism is like systematically. You start with the toes of your right foot, and you go to the toes of your left foot, and the toes, the ankles, the leg of one, leg, whatever, and the other. It's like systematic, but I prefer to do this more organically. I kind of like to just allow my mind to lead me to the different parts of my body I want to like get in touch with, and then the one direction there is that like I try to cover the entire body. Sometimes, and sometimes actually I'll just like focus on my back, for example, if it's tight, whatever, needs to feel more relaxed. So the idea behind this is it's focusing on the feeling, and sometimes, like, when I'm focusing on happiness, when I'm doing this happiness meditation, I will attempt to evoke the feeling of happiness in my body. And this makes a lot of sense. Some people might say, well, happiness is more of an emotion that you feel in your head, not in your body. But they've actually, done studies where they've asked people, when you feel happy, where do you feel it most? And most people feel it mostly in the heart. That's the main region of happiness, but then also in their head. And what's interesting about happiness, they did this for all these different kinds of emotions. And some emotions, like the anger, sadness, fear, whatever, they felt in certain parts of their body, maybe their stomach, whatever. But that happiness was unique in that, like, let's say you have a map of the entire body. Happiness, people reported feeling happiness throughout their entire body, much more so than any other emotion. So, all right, so connecting this with God, the idea would be to feel God's presence, not just, again, intellectually, and not just cognitively, emotionally, but somatically, to feel God's presence in every, part of your body, your skin, just like, just feeling God within you. And I think this is, the rabbi in the talk was talking about, seeing God as transcendent and immanent. Transcendent in the sense that, even though we kind of know that, or we can conclude that God is everywhere and everything, there's a transcendent nature to God, a certain aspect that we can see and feel and hear very clearly another person or ourselves, but that's not the same with God. But this other perspective of immanence, this other characteristic, is that God is accessible to us all the time, because God is everywhere. God is omnipresent. So to feel God's presence within one's body through meditation, that's got, again, I'm not sure I've ever tried to do that. So I am going to, because meditation a lot of times is experimentation. If you've been meditating for a long time, it's interesting. You say, well, what happens if I try meditating or focusing on this or whatever? And yet again, because like you're focusing on whatever, sometimes, like for half an hour, 3 hours, whatever, you can gain a lot of experience of, just at, you know, in in understanding, in sensing and feeling whatever it is you're having to. All right. So let's see. Sorry, the meditation is good. So like, again, the question is, um, how do we feel God more in our lives? And you want to know something? I tend to be somewhat solitary in a way. Most of the work I do is on my own. I don't spend all that much time with people, but I very much enjoy the time I spend with people. And, you know, I think there's a statement, I don't know if it's an Old or New Testament, but it's like the idea is like, you know, um, and it's in this song, I think the wedding song by Paul Stokey, I think, you know, when two or more are gathered together, that then God's presence is there, you know. And so the idea behind this is, yes, it may be the wisest of the various ways. Because, like, you know, I'm not sure how wise it is to just spend hours each day meditating, you know. But it may be that that to be with others, you know, may summon up that feeling of God's presence. Because, you know, from that perspective, I mean, you could, you know, focus. And again, I'm, you know, talking to myself a lot with this also, because this is, you know, these are things that I'm beginning to think about more, and naturally I want to experiment with them. Just, but for example, with other people, it's like God is manifesting her will through them also. So you're listening to someone say something, whatever it is, and you have this awareness that that you're listening to God's words, God's will, and then like you're seeing them, and again, like everything is God. God manifests herself through everything, through us as people. So in a certain very real sense, you're seeing God, you know. And then the person may say things that evoke emotions in you, and and I guess, you know, in a certain sense, you're feeling God, or you're feeling, you know, the result of God's communication. So let's see. So I've got about 5 minutes left. Yeah, this. So now I want to kind of like pull back to this a bit, get a bit more conceptual. When religion first began, I believe it was animism. And animism sees everything as quote unquote alive. That a rock just isn't a rock. The clouds just aren't like water vapor. You know, lightning isn't just electromagnetic, you know, energy. That animists understood that everything is God, you know, and it's a little different from idol worship, because idol worship, that create a little, you know, wooden statue and say, oh, this is God. Whereas like, no, this is like, you know, animism, like everything is God. Similar to pantheism, that kind of like suggests that God, and very accurately, I think, you know, that if God created the universe, God is the universe. So the universe and God are synonymous. So like, but with this animist perspective, it's interesting because it's I believe the first experience of spirituality, you know, for the most part, maybe. Um, and so like, again, to see everything as divine. So now we've come full circle. We went from there to like, well, there's a well, I mean, like, no, with animism, yes, like everything, you know, rock is God, everything is God. Then like they went from there to, well, there's a sun god, and there's like Zeus, and like, you know, different Greek and Roman gods and other kinds of gods. And then we came to this understanding, well, if there are all these gods, there has to be a top god, you know, that, because like conceptually we understand that if there's two of anything, there has to be one unifying force behind it. And that's our conception of a monotheistic God, that, that by reason, you know, there has to be this God that governs everything, that is everything. So so yeah, so what happened is like we developed this understanding, monotheistic understanding of the God world, with a transcendent and immanent God. But I'm not sure, I think we've lost sight to a certain extent of this idea, this reality that God is everywhere. You know, God is, that we are God, our thoughts are God. Now, I'm not going to get into this in this episode because we've only got 2 minutes, but you know, one thing, I'm not going to into too much. You know, when we think of God as being completely everything, then like naturally the thoughts come up, well, that means that God is evil and pain. And we don't like to see God in that way. Logically, you know, it's kind of like inescapable. If God is everything, then God has to, include that. But I think we may want to just transform our understanding, our conceptual understanding of evil and pain. Meaning that like, instead of like evil, well, you know, God is just purposely trying to hurt us, you know, for some malicious intent, which I don't believe. It's kind of like more of a parent that like we do something wrong, God, you know, and a parent punishes us out of love. So this evil or this punishment that we, you know, sometimes sense comes from God. It's not malicious. It's not evil in that sense. So and that's something I want to cover a lot, just because that's a very difficult, you know, concept for many people. Hopefully, when I talk with my friend Andy again soon on a future episode, we can delve into that. So all right, so that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching. Catch this every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on White Plains Community Media, channel 76 if you get Optimum, 45 if you get Verizon. And you can see if you miss it there, the episodes are on YouTube. And this again, like I've mentioned, that after I attend a class with a rabbi, my presentations reflect that in a very, very positive way. And I think this is a perfect example, because again, like the class right before I started recording this was an hour of just, you know, talking about God and thinking about God, not just conceptually, but this feeling of God. And so like it was very positive. So like, you know, I'm going to, you know, as much as I can, I'm going to try to record future episodes after classes. Thanks for watching, and God willing, see you soon. Thanks.